We are in 2 Kings chapter 20. Second Kings chapter 20, this is God's word. In those days Hezekiah became ill and was at the point of death. The prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz, went to him and said, "This is what the Lord says, put your house in order because you're going to die. You will not recover." Hezekiah turned his face to the wall and prayed to the Lord, "Remember, O Lord, how I have walked before you faithfully and with wholehearted devotion and have done what is good in your eyes." And Hezekiah wept bitterly. Before Isaiah had left the middle court, the word of the Lord came to him. "Go back and tell Hezekiah, the leader of my people, this is what the Lord, the God of your father David, says. I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. I will heal you. On the third day from now, you will go up to the temple of the Lord. I will add 15 years to your life, and I will deliver you and this city from the hand of the king of Assyria. I will defend this city for my sake and for the sake of my servant David." Then Isaiah said, "Prepare a poultice of figs." They did so and applied it to the boil, and he recovered. Hezekiah had asked Isaiah, "What will be the sign that the Lord will heal me and that I will go up to the temple of the Lord on the third day from now?" Isaiah answered, "This is the Lord's sign to you that the Lord will do what he has promised. Shall the shadow go forward 10 steps, or shall it go back 10 steps?" "It is a simple matter for the shadow to go forward 10 steps, said Hezekiah. "Rather have it go back 10 steps. Then the prophet Isaiah called upon the Lord, and the Lord made the shadow go back the 10 steps it had gone down on the stairway of Ahaz. At that time, Merodach-Baladan, son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent Hezekiah letters and a gift because he had heard of Hezekiah's illness. Hezekiah received the messengers and showed them all that was in his storehouses, the silver, the gold, the spices, and the fine oil, his armory, and everything found among his treasures. There was nothing in his palace or in all his kingdom that Hezekiah did not show them. Then Isaiah the prophet went to King Hezekiah and asked, "What did those men say, and where did they come from?" "From a distant land," Hezekiah replied. "They came from Babylon." The prophet answered, "What did they see in your palace?" "They saw everything in my palace," Hezekiah said. "There is nothing among my treasures that I did not show them." Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, "Hear the word of the Lord. The time will surely come when everything in your palace and all that your fathers have stored up until this day will be carried off to Babylon. Nothing will be left, says the Lord. And some of your descendants, your own flesh and blood, that will be born to you, will be taken away, and they will become eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon." "The word of the Lord you have spoken is good," Hezekiah replied, for he thought, "Will there not be peace and security in my lifetime?" As for the other events of Hezekiah's reign, all his achievements and how he made the pool and the tunnel by which he brought water into the city, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Hezekiah rested with his fathers, and Manasseh, his son, succeeded him as king. May God add his blessing to this reading from his holy and inspired word. Folks, I don't even know if I'm going to get to the second half of this chapter. Okay? There is so much in this chapter that is so remarkable and so challenging for us that I literally am not sure if this morning I'll get through the whole chapter. But let's take it in 2 pieces. The first piece is this remarkable narrative, true story, in which the king is gravely ill and not just afraid that he might die, but told by the prophet of God, "You're going to die." Well, of course, he did die eventually. But he was also told, "You will not recover." And then the Lord chose to heal him after he had cried out to the Lord. Having heard the word of the Lord, he didn't like the word of the Lord. Isaiah comes and says, "You're going to die, you will not recover." And he turns and he starts praying and he says, "Oh, God, please." And he weeps bitterly. I mean, he's not just shedding a tear. It's just, I mean, he's really crying. Because he's going to die. And he doesn't want to die. Now, just a little reality check. We already said he's going to die, so are we. We're all going to die, right? We're all going to die. So if you get word that you're going to die, well, hey, that shouldn't be shocking, right? We're all going to die. But the problem was he was going to die soon with a boil that apparently was miserable. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I fully understand the dynamics of all that's going on here. But what is amazing is that Isaiah is sent by God to deliver the word that he's going to die, that he will not recover. He tells him that. Hezekiah pleads with God, and God says, okay, I'll give you another 15 years. What? I mean, where does that fit with the sovereignty of God? Well, let me tell you where it fits with the sovereignty of God. God is able to say, okay, I'll give you another 15 years. That makes him sovereign. You understand? Nobody but a sovereign God could do that. If God was simply foreseeing the future and telling us what's going to happen, and Hezekiah says, oh, please heal me. God says, I'm sorry, all I can do is tell you what's going to happen. Then God wouldn't be sovereign, he'd simply have foreknowledge in the sense of seeing the future. But God has foreknowledge in a much deeper way than that. It's a relational way, and when it says that he foreknew us, it's talking about a relationship he had with us before we were born. Not because we were airy-fairy spirits floating around in heaven waiting to be given bodies, but because God is not limited by time. And so when God says, you're going to die, and we say, oh, please, let me live a little longer. God, because he is sovereign, is able to say, okay, I'll give you another 15 years. He's sovereign. You understand that? Some people look at this and try to suggest that, no, God is this vacillating God. He's not a vacillating God. God does what he wants, and part of what he wants is to interact with us. And so he wrestles with Jacob. He bargains with Abraham. Not because he is not sovereign, but because he wants to draw us into his plan. Got that? God is sovereign. He is absolutely in control. And that's why he was able to send Isaiah to say, you're going to die, you'll not recover. And then when he gets the appropriate response from Hezekiah, say, okay, I'll give you another 15 years. You got that? Understood? I hope that's clear. Now, the second thing is, this sovereign God who chooses to heal uses a poultice of figs. What's with that? If God has all power, and he does, why is he using a poultice of figs? I mean, Isaiah, look at it. Isaiah is sent back to tell him, I've heard your prayers, seen your tears, I'll heal you. On the third day from now, you're going to go up to the temple of the Lord, and I'll add 15 years to your life, and I'll deliver you in this city from the hand of the king of Assyria. I'll defend this city for my sake and for the sake of my servant David. Then Isaiah said, prepare a poultice of figs. They did so and applied it to the boil, and he recovered. I mean, I'm all with this supernatural thing up until we got the poultice of figs. If you're wondering what a poultice of figs, it basically was like a healing ointment made out of figs. So are figs good to put on a boil? If God tells you to. Okay? Does God choose sometimes to work through medicines? Absolutely. God could give us nutrition without our having to eat, but instead he chose to give us food to eat and says that's how we're supposed to get our nutrition. God could make it so that we're hydrated just by absorbing moisture from the atmosphere. But he didn't. He gave us things to drink, like water. Okay? God could have made it so that we don't have to breathe through our mouth. We have gills. but he didn't. He gave us a mouth and a nose and lungs, and we draw air in this way. God created the natural, material things around us, including our bodies. They're well designed, they're remarkable creations, and we shouldn't just be waiting around for something supernatural to happen so that we don't have to follow the same rules as everybody else. Okay? I seek to be a spiritual man, to walk in the Spirit and do what God tells me. But if I decided that just to demonstrate my faith, I'm going to take a hammer and hit my thumb, and if I believe hard enough, I don't think it'll hurt. That would be really stupid. Because no matter how spiritual you are, if you hit your thumb with a hammer, it should hurt. Okay? It's supposed to hurt. That pain is your friend. And there are times when even a physical affliction can be a blessing to you if it helps you spiritually to depend upon God, as seemed to be the case in the life of the Apostle Paul, who was given a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment him, sent by God. Again, the sovereign God using even physical suffering in order to accomplish His purpose for our good. Please understand that the fact that God is sovereign and the fact that God is able to heal doesn't mean that we are, when we are following the Lord, divorced from our physical environment and immune to the laws of nature. If Jesus tells you to walk on the water, you can walk on the water. Otherwise, you need a boat or to be a really good swimmer. Okay? Jesus never said, if you trust in me, gravity won't work on you. I thank God for gravity. Without it, I would find it very difficult to get from one place to another. I mean, can you imagine me up there trying to pull myself through the air to get back to wherever I needed to be? Because one minute he was talking, the next minute he just floated away. Okay? Yeah, I think every time he gets excited about the Lord, he just kind of floats, I mean, it would certainly be entertaining for you, but it would be inconvenient, actually. I'd have a hard time with my food. Go like this and the stuff just kind of goes up like you've seen in the space module. Have you seen that? I mean, it's hard for them to eat. They really have to work at it. You can have a little fun with it sometimes, but it's really not convenient. We need gravity. But I don't always enjoy gravity. When I'm going up the stairs and I miss a step, all of a sudden I don't feel like gravity is my friend. But it really is. Well, likewise, here in this passage, we see the sovereignty of God at work, and we see very natural applications of material laws also at work. When we apply the laws of God, even the laws of nature, in obedience to His direction, it is amazing what happens, because God can use those things for our good as well. You understand that? So the idea of having a poultice made of figs, using a medicinal ointment on a sickness, when God has already said, I'm going to heal you, is not inconsistent. I just think if you're going to trust God, you just need to trust God and you ought not to take medicine. I know a lot of people feel that way. I've known some people who felt that way and died of things that could have been treated medically. I've also known people who trusted in doctors instead of in God and died. Because no matter how good the doctor is and how powerful the medicine is, if God says your days are up, your days are up. I've known people who went to the doctor and got a clean bill of health and died because their time was up. And I've known people who were told by the doctor, you only have a few months. And years later, they were still going strong. So I'm not suggesting to you that medicine is the answer. I'm suggesting to you that this passage shows us that God heals, and He often uses medicine. Is that clear? Hope that's helpful. Now then, Hezekiah asked, this is verse 8, Hezekiah then asked Isaiah, What will be the sign that the Lord will heal me and that I will go up to the temple of the Lord on the third day from now? Normally, when people ask questions like that, that is not a good thing. You've received the word of the Lord. He says he's going to heal you. And now you're saying you need a sign? That's usually not good. But in this case, God says, okay, we'll give him a sign. And Isaiah says to him, what kind of sign would you like? You want the shadow to go 10 steps down, 10 steps back? Well, if you understand what a shadow is, where shadows come from, the idea of getting the shadow to advance more quickly than expected, I mean, it's already headed in that direction, so if it goes down 10 steps, it's really going to go down 10 steps anyway. I mean, I'm lying here in my bed, I'm seeing the shadow on the stairs as the sun is setting, and so, it's already going to go 10 steps. What would really be remarkable is if it went backward, because that would be like the sun was going in the other direction. Now, God wouldn't have to make the sun go in the other direction in order to do that. He wouldn't have to reverse the turning of the earth. All he has to do is adjust the light, which is easy for God to do, okay? Anything is easy for God to do, as long as it is his plan. And God chose, in this situation, to say, okay, you want the shadow to go 10 steps up? No problem. And the shadow goes backwards. Whoa. So what do we learn from this? Again, God is sovereign. God is sovereign over all. He is totally in control. Yeah, but you were just talking about natural law and like God has put things in motion so that we shouldn't expect we can just walk on water because we think it's cool. No. And this is the only time that this happened with the shadow in Hezekiah's lifetime. And the only time it happened with the shadow in Isaiah's lifetime that we have any record of. But on this occasion, God chose to do something totally outside the normal laws of nature in order to once again demonstrate God is sovereign and you can trust my word. Is that clear? So, the shadow goes in the other direction. And everybody says, wow, that is really amazing. It is amazing, absolutely amazing. But how difficult is that for someone who spoke the universe into being? Okay? We look at the laws of nature. Well, I just don't know. I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that, there really is any. I mean, there may be a supreme being, but he has set the laws of motion into place. And so all these things are, I watched, I don't know, it was History Channel, Science Channel, something. I watched something last night about black holes and the debate between Hawking and Gould. I think it was Gould, may have been Goulding, it was somebody, one of the inventors of string theory. And it was all about theoretical physics and whether or not there's information lost in the universe, which Hawking proposed, and this other guy said can't be, and the other guy proposed a theory to shoot down Hawking, and eventually Hawking conceded, and it was a waste of time. But all of this to say that there are people whose whole lives are wrapped up in trying to understand the laws of nature, and many of them believe that this is basically all there is, instead of understanding, no, there's a creator of all these things. Now let me tell you, if we couldn't have contact with that creator, then this would be all there is to deal with. But the amazing thing is that the creator of all things has chosen to have a relationship with us. Here we are, tiny little specks on a blue ball that is spinning in space around one of the smaller stars among countless stars. And we have this limited lifespan, just like the flowers of the field. Here today, gone tomorrow. And the creator of the whole thing takes a personal interest in us. That's amazing. But if that's true, and it is, if that's true, then it shouldn't amaze us that God is able to work miracles. He can, and He does. And we most often see them in answer to prayer. And there was a book published in the 1970s by an author whom I won't name called "A Miracle a Day Keeps the Devil Away." Perhaps one of the most vapid things ever to hit Christian bookstores. I'm sure it was well-intentioned, but it created a false mindset and caused, I think, some people, maybe it just reinforced some people, always looking for something supernatural around every corner all the time. And sometimes it really kept them from focusing on the job at hand, okay? Because they were all constantly looking for the supernatural. When we read the Bible, we read about a lot of supernatural things, a lot of miracles, a lot of amazing stuff. But I want you to understand the reason this stuff is in here is partly so we know this is really unusual, okay? This was not every day of Hezekiah's life. Stuff like this happened to him. No. This is written down because it was an extraordinary, game-changing kind of moment, okay? And so, does God work miracles and answer prayer in amazing ways? Yes. Did God, in a remarkable way, I wouldn't say miraculous, but certainly remarkable providence, provide me with a pair of purple leather Converse All-Stars? Yes. But I've still got those shoes in the back of my car, and that was in the 1970s. He doesn't do that for me once a week, you know. Lord, I need some new shoes. This time, please, not purple. You know, I don't do that. Now if I need a pair of shoes, I go buy a pair of shoes, okay? Back then, I was broke, and I had to have athletic shoes, and I didn't want to look silly. So I prayed that God would give me really cool shoes. Leather, Nike, or not Nike, they didn't exist. Leather Converse All-Stars. Lord, please give me leather Converse All-Stars. And God said, okay, you want to look cool? How do you like purple? Now, I tell stories about remarkable things that God has done in my life because God has done remarkable things in my life. But I'm still telling stories from the 1970s in some cases. Do you understand? Learn from that, okay? Don't expect God every time, every day, to do something just for your entertainment. Oh, look, that tree is shrinking. Okay? No. Moses saw a burning bush. He's the only guy in Israel to ever have that experience, and it only happened to him once. You understand? It's an historic event, and it's an extraordinary thing. We should not have... The reason I say this is because if you get this unrealistic expectation that you're supposed to have a miracle a day to keep the devil away, you're going to end up, like that author did, probably falling away from the Lord for a while. Because you're going to say, this just really isn't working. It's not all it's hyped up to be. Well, God isn't the one who was hyping it. It was your sales agent. Okay? So I'm trying to tell you, know that God is sovereign, that He loves you, that He's able to work miracles, and that He does sometimes work miracles. But understand that most of the time you're going to be living in the nitty-gritty of life. And when you get sick, you may need a poultice of figs. And God can make the shadow go backwards, but most of the time He won't. This is an extraordinary event in history. Got that? Okay, now let's look at the second half of the chapter. At that time, Merodach-Baladan, son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent Hezekiah letters and a gift because he'd heard of Hezekiah's illness. Hezekiah received the messengers and showed them all that was in his storehouses, the silver, the gold, the spices, and the fine oil, his armory, and everything found among his treasures. There was nothing in his palace or in all his kingdom that Hezekiah did not show them. I had a roommate in college. We're back to the 70s. And our college was one of those old-fashioned Christian colleges where Guys and girls not only had separate rooms, they had separate dorms, okay? They didn't live in the same building. But once a week, we had what was called open house. And girls were allowed to visit the guys' dorm. Guys were allowed on certain days or evenings to visit, only evenings, to visit the girls' dorms, and only for a couple of hours of time. During that time, you could visit in your room and socialize. This was designed to try and make it so that people could go to the mission field together. And so, you know, there needed to be some context, some opportunity for socialization with members of the opposite sex so that you could begin to sort out, do I like her? Do I like him? You know, that kind of thing. Well, my roommate had the same routine no matter which girl he got to come to his room. I mean, he, you know, hey, you want to come to my room for open dorm night? Well, okay. He was, I'll go ahead and say this, he was the goalie on the soccer team, and he was a very good goalie. That's the kindest thing I can say about him. When the girls would show up at our room, he would bring them in, and I mean, it was a little progression. He would show, this is my stereo, it's got this many watts, you know, and he'd take more, and this is I'm trying to remember now what all was on. He had his stereo, I think he had a clock that he was real proud of, as I recall, and he would take them over to his cabinet where his clothes were hung. We each had a little closet, mini closet that was up off the floor, and open it up, and he'd say, this is my suede jacket. This is my suede jacket, can you believe it? He would show them all of his stuff, and he had this progression. I can't remember now what all was on the list because it was just hilariously boring. And the girls initially, you know, they'd come in and it's like, wow, you know, and after a few minutes they were like, yeah, okay, well, I'm going to go now. But I mean, he's taking them around and desperately trying to impress these girls with his stuff. Look at this, I got this, and hey, I got this too, I got this. Hezekiah was showing off. I mean, that's what he was doing. He showed them everything. He showed them how much money he had. I mean, imagine if you came to my house and I said, can I show you my bank statement? You know, I've got this account, and then I've got a retirement account. And the value on my cars is this. And I mean, they're all old and they're all used, but if you add them together, it's worth this much. And well, let's see. Oh, I've got a pair of cufflinks. Have you seen my cufflinks? I mean, Hezekiah went through and showed these visitors from a foreign land all his stuff. Doggone it. That's really not what foreigners need to know about us. Because not only should we not be showing off, but there was no indication that he really talked with them about God. Right? These people didn't know God. They're foreigners. They don't worship the God of Israel. But I'm sure he showed them the temple. But if he talked to them about God, it was in the context of all his stuff. The silver, the gold, the spices, the fine oil, his armory, and everything found among his treasures. It's like an adolescent show-off. It's really not impressive, not a good plan. So Isaiah, the prophet, goes to see him and says, what did those men say and where'd they come from? Oh, they came from a distant land. They came from Babylon. We have someone here from Germany. We have someone here from Switzerland. We are so uptown, okay? We are so sophisticated. We have foreigners in our midst. We are very proud of this fact, okay? And while they are here, we are going to show them everything, okay? Because we want them to be impressed and go back to their land and tell those people about the most amazing place in America, Wares Valley Ranch. Do you know there really are a lot of people who approach life and ministry that way? I don't want to revile anybody else, but I just want to tell you, the most amazing thing about this place is the way that God works here. That's what's so amazing. Now, when people come and we show them the houses and we show them the school facilities and all that kind of stuff, that's okay as long as the thrust of the story is how God has provided all of this for us. That God has done this because He loves the children in this place and wants to provide for them because He loves them. That's a good story to tell. But if our story is about us and how much we've got, preening around, that is not pleasing to God. And this was not pleasing to God. And Isaiah says, hear the word of the Lord. The time will surely come when everything in your palace and all that your fathers have stored up until this day will be carried off to Babylon. Nothing will be left, says the Lord. And some of your descendants, your own flesh and blood, that will be born to you will be taken away, and they will become eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. And Hezekiah turned his face toward the wall and wept bitterly. Nope. When Hezekiah heard that future generations of his own family were going to suffer horribly and everything was going to be wiped out and carried away, he said, well, that's good. Because if I understand you right, you're saying it's going to be okay in my lifetime, right? Ew. Now, the reason I want to emphasize this is not only because that was a really sorry attitude, but it's the only explanation I can come up with for why his son Manasseh was so opposite of Hezekiah's life. You see, during those extra 15 years God gave him, Hezekiah had a son, Manasseh, who is mentioned at the end of the chapter. Hezekiah rested with his fathers, and Manasseh, his son, succeeded him as king. And Manasseh turns out to be a very bad dude. Really rotten. How in the world could he turn out so badly? Well, God knows. But I tend to believe it had something to do with the fact that at this stage in his father's life, his father knew he had 15 years left and he was going to enjoy it. He knew he was going to die and he wasn't going to worry about the future because, hey, God says that's going to be rough, but as long as I'm around, things are good. And so he was happy to hear that the future judgment was going to miss him. I don't want to argue eschatology with people. I don't want to talk about the evidence for pre-tribulational rapture versus mid-tribulational rapture versus post-tribulational rapture. I really don't want to argue. But I will tell you this. If your attitude about the pre-tribulation rapture, which a lot of my friends are 100% convinced of the pre-tribulation rapture. I'm voting for the pre-trib rapture, by the way. I've told God that is my strong preference. But I have some folks that I know who are 100% convinced that we're going to get out of here before it gets real bad. And I must say, I don't really like their attitude. And I don't think God likes it either. And the reason I say that is because we've got brothers and sisters around the world who are suffering torture and death right now. And instead of being really concerned about them, a lot of folks are just wanting to make sure it's not going to get tough for us. That's not a good attitude. Furthermore, what we're saying is we're going to be caught up to be with the Lord, and these other suckers are going to be left behind, and then they'll know we were right. Okay? They call us idiots now. They think we're fanatics now. But one of these days, in the twinkling of an eye, poof, we're going to disappear, and they're going to be left holding the bag. If you're not saved, you better hope that the airline pilot isn't either. Ew, I hadn't thought about that. Well, think about it. Well, at least the co-pilot hopefully is a non-Christian. I'm just saying, If the pre-trib rapture works out the way we'd like for it to, there are going to be all kinds of folks suddenly gone. And those suckers out there are going to say, ooh, we should have listened. And we're going to say, na, 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 na. I don't think God likes that attitude. Because we ought to be concerned for the people who don't know Him. We ought to be eager for them to be part of the family. Even the people who would laugh at us, mock us, scorn us, persecute us. So, Hezekiah, on the whole, great man, great life, great example of zeal for the Lord, started his life really well, made some mistakes, on the whole is a positive role model. And God blessed him and answered his prayer. But I would submit to you that just as in the early years he should not have tried to placate the king of Assyria by stripping the gold off the doors and sending it to the king, stuff that had already been consecrated to the Lord now taken back and given to a pagan king in order to try and appease him, just as that was a mistake, in the same way I would submit to you that this attitude toward the end of his life was a costly mistake as well. Pastor Wood, have you ever made mistakes? Oh, have I ever? Yes. And I hope you will not make the same mistakes I have made. But is there anything positive in Hezekiah's life? Lots. And I hope that you picked up on that as we went through his story.